Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on roadmap and timelines for cracking the MBA admissions process for overseas MBA programs. Thank you for taking the time on a Saturday to join us. This webinar is organized by CREDILA, an HDFC Limited company, and it is presented by Crack the MBA, a leading education advisory firm. My name is Nupur Gupta. I am the founder of Crack the MBA. I completed my education from United States, graduated from the full-time MBA program at the Wharton School, an Ivy League institution located in Philadelphia. I founded Crack the MBA to transmit my learning and research to prospective MBA students who aspire to attend leading universities worldwide. In terms of agenda, we will talk about the roadmap and timelines as part of the MBA application process for 30 to 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session. If you have a question in the middle of the presentation, please note it down and we will get to it at the end. So just to make sure that everybody's still up after the lunch and not sleepy, we'll start off with a fun poll to see how much we know about our fellow countrymen. So if you look on your screens, you will be able to see the poll question and it's now live. The question is, which school did Mr. Anil Ambani complete his MBA from? The options are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, MIT, and Oxford. We'll take a few seconds to allow everybody to vote, and after that, I will declare the results. So almost everybody has voted. We have perhaps one or two vote remainings. We'll stop the poll in about 5 seconds. So if anybody is still looking to vote, please do so at the earliest. Okay, so now we're closing the poll. Great. And as per the poll results, 17% people think Mr. Ambani graduated from Harvard. Another 17% think it's from Stanford. 48% think it's from Wharton, and nobody thinks he's graduated from MIT, whereas 17% think he graduated from Oxford. It seems we have a very smart audience amongst us, as the majority indeed is right. He did graduate from the Wharton School, and this was in 1983. Great. So it seems everybody's up as well. So, on that note, we will get started with the webinar and the presentation. So, as you can see, the agenda today, we will be covering a lot of topics, so we will have to move quickly. We're looking to cover GMAT, school selection, essays, letters of recommendation, resume, or CV as it's also known, networking, the application form and timelines, as well as the interview process. So, just to get a better sense for what you guys look to find out more about, I'm going to conduct yet another poll. And this is just to find out what topic you would want us to focus more on in this presentation. So here goes, the poll is launched again. What topic would you like for the presentation to focus more on? The GMAT, school selection, essays, letters of recommendation, or the CV or resume? We'll take 10 more seconds and then we will close the poll. Going, gone. Wonderful. So here I'm sharing the results. So it seems majority of the people would like to focus on school selection, and after that the CV, and then people are agnostic between the GMAT and the essays. It seems the recommendations are what people want me to focus the least on. So it seems you guys are very comfortable and sure that you will be getting good recommendations. That's reassuring to hear. Great. So, with that in mind, we'll get started with the GMAT and would not spend as much time perhaps as we would on school selection. So, the GMAT, for those of you who've not heard what the GMAT is, it is the test you would be required to take. As part of the MBA admissions process, this is a test of rigor, and it really tests you because it's not just about knowing the concepts, but it's a test of endurance because you are spending so much time in that room just cooped up and answering so many questions that it can be a testing experience, so to speak, pun intended. So, in terms of the sections that the GMAT focuses on, there are four sections: the analytical writing assessment, which has two questions and it takes 30 minutes, the quantitative section with 75 minutes, and the verbal section, which takes another 75 minutes. The integrated reasoning section was added last year, in June last year, and it has 12 questions and it takes 30 minutes. Up to last year, schools did not have enough data to evaluate this thoroughly, but going forward, this might change from this year. The maximum that one can score on the GMAT is 800. For a competitive score, you can be looking at anywhere north of 700 for some of the leading programs. Of course, that does not mean that it is a threshold, and if you don't have 700, you cannot apply to any of these programs. No, that is not the case at all. Unlike the CAT in India, the GMAT is not a test which will restrict you necessarily from admissions. Even if you have something like a 600 or sometimes even lower, you can still get into some of the top programs. So, unlike the Indian programs, the GMAT is not a cutoff. It is just part of a holistic process which schools look at as a data point to evaluate your candidacy. So, a lot of times we get asked about some study materials and resources that we recommend for the GMAT. And this is a list that we personally recommend based on feedback we have received from students who have scored in the high 700s, some of them over 750, 760, 770. So, based on that, this is the list of materials. The official guide is a must, and not just the comprehensive guide, but also the supplementary guides for the different sections. This is something you should know inside out and probably practice more than once, a few times. Then on mba.com, which is also the portal where you will register for the test, they have something called GMAT Prep, which is a computer adaptive testing software where you can practice tests which actually simulate the experience of taking the real GMAT. This is something we highly recommend. There are two tests. We recommend practicing these multiple times over a period of time as your competency level increases, because it is a computer adaptive test and the questions that you will see will differ depending on how many questions you're getting right. So the computer adaptive test can adapt it based on your level of competency. The Manhattan GMAT is little bit more advanced, but a lot of high test scoring people recommend this resource highly. The Princeton review is little bit easier in terms of content, yet it's something that could be good when you're looking to get a grasp of different concepts, different formulae, etc. Aristotle Prep is something that for verbal, we would recommend their books because it explains things in a way which is easier to understand. They have explanations to the OG questions also. So for verbal, we recommend that. And of course, for difficult questions, again, Kaplan is something, Kaplan 800, that you can look at. In terms of forums, Beat the GMAT and GMAT Club forums are comprehensive. They have a huge plethora of information, and we highly recommend those. For critical reasoning section, which is part of verbal, we recommend Power Score CR Bible, which is another resource that people have recommended. So, coming to some do's and don'ts as part of the GMAT preparation, we recommend that you register for a test date early. What happens is about a month before you're trying to take the test, it's difficult to get dates. So it's advisable to register 2 to 3 months ahead of time. Alternatively, for whatever reason, if you feel the need to register for a date at the last minute, typically it's easy to get dates when the test is just a week out, because we imagine it's people cancel out. So that is a logical explanation. So either you register about 2 months ahead of time, or if you're trying to get a test date at the last minute, you can do it when there's about a week remaining. If you're one of those risk taking people who don't care necessarily if you have a guaranteed date to look forward to, one thing that we highly recommend is maintaining an error log. Now, you may ask what an error log is. This is basically a log of all the questions that you get wrong and also what kind of questions you're getting wrong. The idea is to hone in on your specific weak areas and to focus on strengthening those so that you are able to score high above the 700 levels. If you want to find out more about what an error log looks like, you can send us an email and we can refer you to a file that you can use as a template. It's also available on the Crack the MBA website in one of the blog posts. One thing that we want to recommend is that you take mock tests in one sitting entirely. What a lot of people do is they may break that mock test up into different pieces. If there's a break between one section, they may take a little bit longer than they otherwise would. We recommend you do not do that. Take the entire test in one sitting of 3.5 to 4 hours, simulating the actual conditions the day of the test, because the GMAT is a test of endurance. If you don't practice and get used to this, you will have a difficult time the day of the test. This we've already covered, understanding OG and supplements inside out. OG stands for official guide. Then focus on areas of weakness, which you can do if you maintain an error log and identify your weak areas, and plan your schedule in a manner so that you can retake the GMAT if needed. A lot of students, most students, I should say, end up taking the GMAT more than once. And we will be covering timelines at the end of the presentation. So there you can get a better sense for how you can plan it out so that you can take the GMAT twice if need be. In terms of don'ts, these are sort of related to the do's. Do not skip the AWA, which is the analytical writing assessment questions, while practicing mock tests. Most people tend to do that, but then the day of the test, they feel drained when they answer the AWA questions and come to the subsequent sections. So even while practicing, please, please, please practice this section. Do not eat very heavy food before the test because you might feel sleepy, and that's the last thing you would want before the test. Do not assume you understand a question because you got it right. This refers to when you're practicing for the test. So, while maintaining an error log, also list the questions you may have got right, but the concept you were not sure of. When you're taking the test, do not waste time on a question. If it's taking too long, just take an educated guess and learn to move on, else you might screw up the test by taking too much time on one or two questions. And this one is when the test date is approaching and you feel you're not ready, you're better off not taking it, canceling it, and rescheduling, as opposed to taking the test and then reporting scores which may not be ideal. When you report your scores, colleges can see previous scores as well. So this is relevant from that perspective. For further detail, you can go to mba.com and get more detail about GMAT, since this is not an area people want to focus on more. So we won't spend any more time on this. Moving on to the next section, which most people want us to spend more time on, which is school selection, which makes sense because this is an important part of the application process. So, there are numerous factors that one needs to consider while picking schools to apply to. These have been divided into different buckets, such as academic, financial, professional, and student experience related. We will delve in on each of these a little bit more. In terms of the academic criterion, you have to look at rankings, because obviously that's something that is hyped up and everybody tends to look at it a little bit. Not to say that everybody has to look at it, but this could be a factor that is important to you. So there are different publications that publish rankings. For example, Financial Times does it. There is Poets and Quants that does rankings. There's Business Week, US News. So depending on your specific need, you can look at an amalgamation of these different rankings. Poets and Quants does that. They amalgamate the different rankings and then come out with their ranking. So this could be a factor that you look in evaluating what school would be right for you. Then faculty could be a very important consideration as well. If you have focus on specific areas, then you might care what sort of professors are teaching at that school. For example, if strategy is something that's important to you, you might have read about Porter's five forces, or you might have read about some research that was done by Siegel Cow. So these are professors at Harvard and Wharton, respectively. So it's important to look at what are faculty members, the leading experts in your field, what kind of research are they coming out with, what schools are they teaching at, who are the kind of people you would like to work under. You could be doing research projects with some of these people. And then the concentrations that are offered could matter to some people as well. For example, recently we featured an alumna of MIT. She picked MIT specifically because of its strength in supply chain management. So if you have focused interest in certain concentration, you might want to pick a school because of that. For example, some of the cliches which a lot of you may be familiar with, for finance, you go to a place like Wharton, Columbia, Booth. For marketing, it's Kellogg. So, yeah, not to dwell on that any further, but just research and find out what other areas, the concentrations that different schools excel in. Then schools also have guidance around the thresholds they use to evaluate candidates. They have average and median GMAT, the GPA range for your undergraduate education, and also graduate education if you already have a master's. So look at these and see where you stack up compared to what the schools expect and want from candidates. Because as you are evaluating schools, schools are evaluating you as well. So it's a two-way situation where you want them to want you as much as you want them. So, moving on to the next factor, which is financial, then a few things that matter are the cost of the program is going to be important. And of course, it's important to get a sense for how you would be able to finance it, if there's going to be fellowship options, scholarship options, and also what kind of median salaries you're looking at coming out of the program. So, just to give an example, these are converted in INR. If you go to a program such as HBS, you can be looking to spend over a period of 2 years about $180,000, or almost it's over a crore. And in terms of what you can expect to be making, median salaries coming out of the program are 120,000 or 71 lakhs. Of course, this varies depending on what industry you get into, what function you get into, consulting being a bit higher, investment banking, private equity being a bit higher compared to perhaps non-profit, etc. Then next, you also want to look at professional factors. If you are focusing getting into a certain field, you want to look at the internship, full-time job opportunities. You want to look at the alumni network. Where are the alumni from that program or those programs working? How can the network help you get into the place you want to work at? You want to look at the strength of the career management center. How many people are getting their jobs through the career management center? That's a telling indicator as well of the strength of the career management center. And then you can look at other resources such as career treks, which are often organized by students themselves, and other resources that might be available, wherein you can work with with the company on a consulting project while you're at school and get credit for that as well. Sometimes schools will pay for travel to different countries and working on different projects. So these are options and opportunities that you need to consider while evaluating schools as well. In terms of student experience, this is something I cannot highlight enough. People don't focus on this factor enough. They focus more on oftentimes the financial and the professional factors, but experience is a big thing. So location, just as an example, can matter. It's not just about knowing whether you want to be in US or Europe. Also within US or Europe, you it could be knowing whether you want to be in a big city like a New York, or you want to be in a suburban place like Evanston, for example, where Kellogg is located, which has access to a city about 30 to 40 minutes away, yet it's located in sort of a suburban area where it has a very collegial feel. So these are things you need to think about. Then you need to think about the international exposure. This could be a factor when you're evaluating US versus European programs as well. In European programs, because of ease of moving around and access to the different countries in the Euro area, etc., you might have people from more countries. Whereas in US programs, a large population, a large percent of the pool would still be people from US students, even though a lot of these programs would have people from over 70 odd countries as well. Then you want to look at the gender ratio. That could be a factor that you want to consider. For example, a school could have something as high as 42% or 45% women, whereas another school might have as low as 30%. So that could be something that could affect your experience as well. Then class size is something that is important, because you could have a program which is just over 100 students, and then you could have a program such as HPS, which is 900 students. So obviously the resources available would vary as well because of the size. The your alumni network would vary as well because of the size. So this is a factor that you should consider as well while evaluating your programs. Family situation, some schools have a lot of partners. They're called partner clubs, and when you're moving to school full time, you would want for your partner and your children to have a fulfilling experience as well, for those of you who have families. So that's something worth considering. Finding out, get in touch with the partners club, find out what kind of activities they have, whether it's a good fit for your family situation. Then length of program is something that people might be familiar that typically there are 2-year programs and 1-year programs. Of course, there's programs in between as well, like 16 months or 18-month programs. Typically, just generalizing a little bit, the American model is more the 2-year model, and European model is more the 1-year model. So that has certain implications, because when you have a 2-year model, the average age of the attendees is also lower than in a European program. So in general, people would go to a European program after they've worked for a little bit longer compared to American programs, where the average age would be 27 to 28. In the European programs, it would be more like 30. So you need to evaluate what would be a better fit for you, because you want to be working with students and be in a body where you feel you're getting as much as you're giving it to the program as well. Then extracurricular opportunities, let's say if you're into rugby, and that's something that's an integral part of your daily life, you want to make sure there's opportunity for you to explore that interest. Or it could be other interests, like let's say if you're into tasting different kinds of wines, you might want to explore the wine club a little bit more in detail. These extracurricular opportunities could be related to career tracks. Let's say if restructuring is an interest of yours, then you want to focus on that area and see what school might be a good fit for you from that perspective. So, having covered these broad factors, we'll walk you through the process of going about school selection. Let's say there is a Matt who is trying to decide what would be a good program for him, and he broadly has three criteria that he's looking at. It should be a 1-year program, it should be top ranked, and his post MBA goal is to get into management consulting. So, a potential way of narrowing his search could be he could go to different rankings. We mentioned Financial Times, US News, Ports and Cons, etc. He can exclude the 2-year school options, which typically might mean that the American schools may get eliminated, although there are some good one-year programs in US as well. He would do some secondary research on the schools that he would have available. Secondary research mainly being on the internet, just looking at the schools' websites, different publications, blogs, etc. Then primary research would entail actually talking to some students and alumni from the program, and speaking to admissions as well. Then an example of a program that he could come out with after this process is INSEAD, which has a campus in Paris as well as in Singapore. So if you look on Financial Times, it's ranked number 6. It's a top ranked program. It meets the criterion of being a one-year program. And every year it sends hordes of students into management consulting. It's one of the leading MBA programs in Europe. So for school selection, hopefully this should give you a good sense where to get started, how to go about it, what are some of the factors to consider. So next we come to essays or statements of purpose, as they're also known. So just looking at some of the do's or things that are good practices for essays is, even before you start penning down your thoughts with regard to essays, it's important to just sit back and introspect your candidacy. Just get like a list of things that you feel stand out in your candidacy and find a way to incorporate those within the essay prompts. So different schools have different essay questions as part of their applications. Schools may have as little as one question to as many as 10 to 12 questions. I've seen that the European schools tend to have more questions compared to the American schools. This year, Harvard Business School has changed it up a little bit. It's introduced only one question, and even that is optional. So you can see how schools are changing their application process from year to year. One thing that's helpful if you want to craft winning essays, read first person narratives. So an essay is essentially a first person narrative that you're writing in your own voice, saying, I did this, I did that. So when you read first person narratives, it will help you understand what voice and tone to read, to use, and how to come across as somebody who's accomplished while humble at the same time. One thing that is difficult but extremely helpful is writing on a daily basis. All good writers will tell you they write at least 1,000 words a day, if not more. I know this might be a tall ask, but getting closer to the admissions process, this could be effective so that you don't have writer's block when you actually sit down and you are facing a blank screen or a blank page of paper. Then one thing that I don't see a lot of people do is spell check. It's really as easy as just doing it on your computer. It's not that difficult. So please always run it on Microsoft Word. Make sure you've got the spellings right. Make sure you've got the punctuation and grammar right. Your first draft will never be worthy of being submitted to any school. The minimum that I would suggest people iterate over their essays is 3 times. Ideally, I think the number should be a lot higher, but this is the minimum threshold that I suggest people go. And have some time distance in between your drafts, maybe a day or two, sleep over them. Don't do it one after the other, because then it won't be as effective. Then one tip that I don't hear people talk about a lot, but I think is important, is visualization. So Albert Einstein famously said, if I can't picture it, I can't understand it. So basically, if you can evoke pictures in the mind of your readers, that will really help them visualize, and that will make you more memorable. So evoke senses such as smell, sight, sound, touch, taste. That will help the reader understand where you're coming from better. So, to further help you develop some of these skills, I suggest a few books. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but a few that I'll enjoy. Elements of Style is almost the Bible of good writing. It's by Strunk and White, and a lot of writing teachers will recommend this as the ultimate Bible. Then a few others are listed. William Zinsser, a professor at Yale, very respected teacher. Then on writing by Stephen King. And Sheila Bender's writing and publishing personal essays is effective as well in helping you understand how you can go about the essay writing process. In terms of don'ts, the one that I would like to insist on the most is do not use passive voice. So, to give you an example of passive voice, my first visit to Boston will always be remembered by me versus I will always remember my first visit to Boston. In the active voice, you're making yourself the subject. It's more direct and it's more vigorous, so hence it's preferred. This is something that I'll encourage people to be conscious and cognizant of because this is one mistake I see numerous people making all the time. One thing that's a no-no, which it should be common sense, but still would like to stress it: do not reuse material off the internet, specifically without giving the other person credit for it. That's a no-no. Plagiarism is a big no in the West. Do not ask somebody else to write your essays. It's not just about integrity, even though that's extremely important. It's also about training your mind and training yourself in the process, because even when you go to school, you will be expected to write papers and defend your thoughts. And if you cannot do this at this step, like write essays at this step, you will have a hard time when you get to school. So it's not about fooling somebody else, but it's also about fooling yourself at this early stage. So, highly recommend that you write your own essays. It will help you grow as a person. Don't start writing at the last minute. It's impossible to come up with a good essay overnight. Don't turn in your first draft. Again, stress that in the do's as well. uh, and do not turn in work which has not been proofread. So I mean, when you proofread your work, you will find areas to enhance. Get other people to proofread your work as well. Then one thing that people sometimes do is use material that could make admissions committee question their judgment. For example, a question that admissions loves to ask is, what has been one of the greatest challenge you've faced, or a difficult situation. So talking about overcoming a breakup or a failed relationship is not necessarily going to fetch you brownie points with admissions committee members. So please use some discretion while discussing your personal situations. Then another pet peeve that schools have is mentioning the wrong school name. It happens. I mean, it does sound counterintuitive, but when you're doing find replace, the odds of this happening are way higher than you'd imagine. And every year, schools complain about receiving dozens such essays where the school name is wrongly mentioned. So, moving on to letters of recommendation. So, this is one area that people did not necessarily want us to focus too much on. In terms of process, how it works is typically schools require two letters of recommendations, sometimes three. Uh, so it is recommended that you pick professional recommenders as opposed to academics or people from other spheres. When there's three recommendations, then you could pick somebody who's overseeing your work as part of some extracurricular activity or community service. How it would work is you would nominate somebody, a recommender online. The recommender would receive an email with login details. The recommender would have to answer anywhere north of about four odd questions. Sometimes there'll be word limits, sometimes there wouldn't be word limits. And then the recommender would submit the recommendation online. This is broadly how the process works. Some do's with regard to recommendations: have a long list of potential recommenders, which you can shortlist at a later stage. Don't have to start out with a list that's two people long. This gives you flexibility if a recommender is not available or for whatever reason is unable to write a recommendation. You can approach some other person. Have early conversations sharing your career aspirations and your aspiration to go to business school with your recommenders. This will also give you a sense for how supportive they are of your future path. Then you must provide your recommenders a resume or a CV so they have a sense for your career progression or any other relevant detail they would like to highlight. Then provide your recommenders information about your post MBA goals. All schools ask you for your goals, almost all schools. So it would be helpful if the recommender knows what you aspire to do after the MBA so they can stress those specific points as they write your recommendation. It could be a good idea to remind your recommenders about some notable achievements you wish to highlight in your application. This would also help you strengthen the themes that you're picking in your application. Then one thing is that specific anecdotes tend to stand out a lot more and they become memorable. So for example, if your recommender talks about at such and such time, this candidate helped me do everything from setting up an offshore center to recruiting staff for it to getting it going and developing a product that we could launch to market and increase our sales by 100%. Something like that is very specific and it would be effective in making an impression in the minds of admissions committee. So, when picking between two recommenders where almost all things are equal, and one of them is an alumnus of the school you're applying to, and the other one is not, pick the one who is an alumnus, he or she, because their voice would carry a little bit more weight. Of course, the important thing is all things being equal. In terms of don'ts, do not start your recommendations at the last minute. We have heard of cases where a student received a recommendation that said, which was a one line recommendation saying, this was given to me the day the recommendation was due. I have nothing else to say. So you can imagine what sort of impression that would make in the minds of ADCOM. It just reflects so poorly on the student's organization ability and also consideration for the other person. Try to give over a month to your recommenders to finish your recommendations. And even though they will be working on it at the last minute, it's odds are, but at least they cannot begrudge you for giving it to them at the last minute, and they will be more committed to doing a good job. This is the same thing. Give inadequate notice to your recommenders. Try not to write your own recommendations. I know sometimes it can be difficult with recommenders asking candidates to do it themselves. It's better if you can get your recommender interviewed. Oftentimes at Crack the MBA, what we do is we will interview the recommender for our candidates, our clients, and we will get a third person. We will ask a third person to get it written, or we will provide the notes to the recommender for them to then jot it down. So there are ways to facilitate the process for your recommender because we understand a lot of them are busy and you're applying to multiple schools. So from that perspective as well, it can be a lot of work. If somebody tries to decline for whatever reason, do not insist that they recommend you, because let them save their face and get out of it, because odds are they will not be able to justify your candidacy. They will not do a good job and they're just trying to get out of it. Just think of it as a bullet dodged and move on to another recommender. Do not pick a recommender solely because of the designation. For example, if you happen to know the CEO of your company versus a partner of your company who is at a lower designation, the partner might know your work well, whereas the CEO would have met you a few times in meetings and would not have much to say. All things being equal, pick the partner, the person who can talk about how you work day in and day out versus somebody who knows you at a very cursory level. So broadly, this is how recommendation process works. And next we move on to the resume or the CV as it is also known. So in terms of do's for business schools, a one-page resume is a must. Do not have anything longer than that. In some other geographical locations, for example, even in India, it's common to have multiple page resumes. But from business school perspective, one page resume only. Then in at the beginning, it's recommended that you start out with the education section. Even when you get to school, you will have to come up with a resume for the resume book, which is a compilation of resumes of all the students. So there also you will be starting with the education section. So you might as well do that even now. Your application readers will be used to that format. Use active verbs. For example, administered, organized. These help lend power to your candidacy, and in that sense, they project you as a person with power. Focus on bringing out the impact of a task due to your action. So instead of just stating that I led a team that developed a new product, talk about the impact. Think about what sort of impact that had on your company. How did you help the company? Did you help increase the revenue by $100,000, or did you help position your company as a market leader? Think about those things and try to bring that out in your resume. Make sure you highlight extracurricular and community service activities and achievements as well. One thing that I can't stress enough is punctuation and formatting. Attention to detail is extremely important, and this is something that, even though it seems like a minor nitpick, but admissions readers, when they're reading thousands of applications, if they find one person who pays attention to detail versus another person who does not, it's an easy pick for them at that point. It helps to print your CV and then proofread, because sometimes when you print it, you can spot mistakes you may not necessarily on screen. And you can also ensure that it looks good aesthetically. You can create PDF and test it on different platforms such as Mac, PC, then even an iPad perhaps, or mobile. Then quantify results wherever possible. For example, achieved 10% revenue growth. This also links to the point about impact of a task due to your actions. Then mention the time period and geographical location wherever applicable. Definitely for all your institutions you've studied at and all the places you've worked at. In terms of don'ts, it's not required to mention biographical details such as your date of birth, your father's name. These are expected to a large extent in an Indian setting, but you don't need that for a business school resume. It's not recommended to use font size lesser than 10. You want to make sure it's legible for the application reader. Do not try to hide a certain job or try to gloss over something for whatever reason. If there's gaps, you should mention those or explain them in whatever way possible. Do not use subjective language such as achieved excellent results. The word excellent can mean different things to different people. So please try to be specific about what you're talking. You don't need to list each and every achievement. It's your most notable achievements that need to be highlighted in the resume. You don't need to focus on content prior to college, such as your 10th grade result or 12th grade result. That's not relevant from a business school application perspective. In terms of margins, try not to have anything lower than 0.5 on each side. And at the end, when you're done with your resume, just take a look at it and make sure it's not cramped up. There's white space. It does not overwhelm the reader as soon as they look at it. So, broadly, for resume, this is what we wanted to highlight. Um, Looking at the time, we're sort of at 4:15 right now, so we don't have a lot of time remaining. So we'll sort of hurry up for the remaining sections. In terms of networking, staying in India, it might be difficult at times to visit some of these overseas programs. However, if you're traveling for work or for whatever reason, you could plan campus visits. All colleges have campus visit programs. Go on their websites, go to the visit us sections, schedule class visits, attend a class, have lunch with students. They sometimes have a full day of activities planned out. So, day on campus, like attend some of these events. They can be great for you to find out the culture of the college and see whether or not it's a good fit for you. Being in India, you could attend off campus events as well. Colleges are proactive about hosting these locally. So, for example, there's information sessions. Chicago booth had one recently. Then in August end and September, a lot of programs have these information sessions. There's coffee chats going on. For example, Wharton has something in July in Mumbai. There's mixers that you could try to attend. Then there's MBA fairs such as QS World MBA Fair, Top MBA Fair. A lot of these happen in September. There was one in May as well. So there's a lot of opportunity, even being an international student, to engage with the colleges. You can try to get in touch with current students and alumni, use your LinkedIn to your advantage. There's school ambassadors that colleges have. You can have informational interviews with them to learn more. Then, of course, all this was primary research. Then there's your desk research as well, which comes first in terms of order. So this would involve going to individual school websites, then blogs. For example, we run Crack the MBA, where we keep updating news and information from different programs. There's different forums such as GMAT Club. Then there's publications, US News, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Poets and Quants. So you have a lot of options and a lot of information at your disposal. Then we come to the application form. The different components, the application form can be very extensive, like a few pages long. It's typically online. You'd fill out your personal details, your education details, work experience where you worked in the past, your extracurricular and community service experiences, the essays, which we discussed as well, letters of recommendations, which you have to nominate your recommenders and then they submit. You can see whether or not they've submitted it in the system. Then your scores have to be reported directly to the schools as well. Sometimes you can get by reporting the unofficial scores, and then when you get admitted you can submit your official scores, your GMAT, and then the TOEFL, which is the test of English as a foreign language, or IELTS, which when sometimes schools allow it. A lot of schools exempt you from the TOEFL if you have studied in an undergraduate institution where English was the medium of instruction, which applies to most colleges in India. So this is something that varies from school to school, but typically you will be exempt from the TOEFL. For example, Yale recently announced that they are exempting international students from the TOEFL requirement. Then you'd have to submit payment. It could be $200 to $50 depending on college to college, and have a digital signature. Broadly, these are the different components of the application form. In terms of do's, we recommend you start the application form early on in the process, so that if you have any questions, you have enough time to get in touch with the proper authorities and sorting it out. For example, if you need a transcript from your college, you can sort it out, because Indian institutions can take a while in getting that information to you. Consider each piece of the application as valuable real estate. I mean, we all know Indian real estate, it's so expensive, right? We wouldn't just let one room in our commercial property stay vacant. We would want to rent it out. So think of it as each piece, each component is valuable real estate, and you want to make the most of it, else there's an opportunity cost. So try not to repeat yourself in different pieces, but try to highlight different pieces of, or different areas of your candidacy, and clarify your doubts early. Pay attention to detail is important all through, and be consistent with regard to grammar, punctuation, capitalization as well. In terms of don'ts, the servers can get pretty busy at the last minute, so do not scramble to submit at the last minute. There could be some technical errors. uh, I've already mentioned, do not repeat content in different areas. And sometimes there's character limits for responses, so make sure you do not exceed that, else some of your responses may get chopped off. So the sooner you answer these questions, the more comforted you will feel that you're not making some of these mistakes. In terms of timelines, since we're already sitting at the end of June, we'll assume that people are starting out like beginning of July, and people have not taken the GMAT yet. So from that perspective, let's say if you're taking the GMAT, you can 2 months, 1 to 3 months is typically how long people take. So you could take the GMAT, like, and study for it now, and then take it twice up until October. October is the latest we'd stress that you take the GMAT. Ideally, of course, there are people who will take it beyond that as well and still succeed. But if you want to feel comfortable, we recommend you take the GMAT maybe once in August and once in October. That could be the way. I mean, you want to ideally be done in one go, but still plan that in case you're not, you have time to take it again. Your school selection, you have enough time, like July and August, you should try to be done with it. so that then you can focus on those schools, getting to find out more and more, and also attend their events, talk to more and more people, and just focus on getting your application and your essays right. In terms of your essays, I think the more time you spend, the better you will be able to refine them. So we recommend all the way from July to December. This is assuming you're applying in round two deadlines, because if you haven't taken the GMAT also yet, it's probably not the case where you will be able to apply in the September/October round one deadlines. So hence, this is with the assumption that you're applying in round two January sessions. So July to December, you can work on your essays. Then letters of recommendation, you want to start a little bit later in September, when you already sort of have a sense for how your candidacy is shaping up. Your resume, you can and should start now as well. Try to be done by October, so you have ample time to provide it to your recommender. Sometimes you have to submit these to the schools as well and get feedback on your candidacy, more so in the case of European schools. So the sooner you get this ready, the better it is for your purposes. Networking is something that's an ongoing process. The more you network, the better it is, and talk to more and more people and get to know the school inside out. It will help you differentiate your candidacy. The application for Jan deadline, you can start in December and have all your doubts resolved and complete it effectively as well. Then finally, we come to the interview section, which is typically it's optional, in the sense that it's invite only. There are some exceptions, such as Kellogg. There are different types of interviews, blind or not blind, which basically means in a blind interview, the interviewer will only have access to your resume. They won't have access to your application. Or it could be not blind, wherein you will be interviewed on what you've written in your application. For example, in Harvard's case, you could be interviewed by AdCom or current student, or even an alumnus for that matter. It could be on campus, off campus, online through Skype, or it could be telephonic. The basic sorts of questions you can definitely expect, or the pillars of your application, are your why MBA, why now, and why our school. In terms of do's, make sure you get some mock interviews and get some practice, so that you don't feel wooden, or you don't feel like you're stuttering the day off. For your in-person interview, dress smart, arrive early so you're not stressed, make eye contact. It is important. And do not have shifty eyes. For a virtual interview, practice speaking with a smile. It does come across, it does make a difference. Test your technology ahead of time. There's been numerous instances where people have had trouble with Skype. In that case, just opt for a telephonic interview rather than having it blow up in your face. In terms of don'ts, don't ramble, have some sort of hypothesis about what you want to say. Do not answer the question without understanding it. When in doubt, ask them to ask you again. Do not mention other schools. Pretend to know an answer when you don't. Use filler words, naam, theek hai, or something like that. So that's the end of our presentation. And it's been a pleasure to present to such a wonderful audience. Again, my name is Nupur Gupta. Crack the MBA is the name of the firm. And please feel free to reach out to if you would like to schedule a free consultation. The email address is nupur@crackthemba.com, and the phone number is 011 4166 5201. Mobile number is 98737 65201. We are located in Okhla Industrial Estate, Phase 3, Modi Mill. And at this point, I would like to thank CREDILA for organizing the webinar, and all of you for being a wonderful audience. We will take questions, and in case those of you did not know, the best question will get a gift voucher from Flipkart worth rupees 500. This will be decided after the webinar and will be posted on Monday on Credila's Facebook page. So with that, I would like to thank you once again and invite all of you for Q&A. So as people are writing the questions, we will have one other poll, just to get a sense for what geographical locations people are more interested in. Where would you like to get an MBA? USA, Europe, and Asia. So those of you who have questions, please write away, and other people can also work on answering the polls. Okay, so a question that has been posed by Mr. Vivek Datta. What are the common questions and their answers during MBA interview? So, we covered the pillars of the MBA application process. In addition, what I would like to stress is some of the things that you can be asked are related to your leadership. For example, tell me about a time when you led a team. How do you work with people? Tell me about a time when you failed. Failure is a question that business schools like to explore as well because they want to see you as a person who learns from a mistake made in the past. So, in terms of questions, you can also be expected to answer something related to current affairs. It's not unheard of. You can be asked questions related to your post MBA career choice. For example, if you want to work in management consulting, you could get a strategy related problem. It's not unheard, or you could get a mini case as well. So, the next question has been posed by Rishabh Wahal. He states that he is a fresher and he does not have any work experience, and he wants to find good MBA universities abroad. So, at the onset, what I would like to say is that good MBA university abroad is subjective. Having said that, what I would say is for some of the leading programs, which is your top 50 programs or so, it is expected that you have some work experience. Colleges do have 2+2 programs wherein you can apply and then be admitted once you worked for 2 years. For example, HBS has a program where you can get admission and then work for 2 years and then join the program. That being said, most places have a preference for anywhere more than 2 years of experience for the leading programs worldwide. When you go lower down in terms of ranking, yes, as freshers, it may be possible. But of course, it all depends on how you define good, which is subjective. Okay, so Nimesh Sharma would like to see the application slide once more. So what I can do is for those of you who would like access to the presentation, you can send me an email at nupur at the rate crackthemba.com, and I can send you a copy of the presentation for those of you who would like access to the presentation. Uh, so, Mr. Murali Shankar has a question stating, what if I am a non conventional candidate? So, while non conventional can mean a lot of different things, but just for the sake of this exercise, we will take a few examples. A lot of people who apply for MBA could be from backgrounds such as finance background or consulting strategy sort of background. So, perhaps in that setting,